Everyone. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to some of you because we are dialing in from all over the world. I want to say happy Veterans Day to those who are veterans and who have served their country. But I also want to give thanks to the Society for Diversity for making space for veterans and making space for the voice of veterans. I have been very, very pleased and fortunate to be certified through this certification institute, the Institute for Diversity Certification under the Society for Diversity. So thank you for the opportunity to open up the conversation today. If you are on this call and you are expecting me to talk for an hour, that will not happen. I am expecting you all to jump in and come off mute and share a little bit about yourself as we go through this session on today. So I want to say thank you again. I am Dr. Serelda Herbin. I am, hi, Mr. Harold. I was on a panel with you. Hey, look at there. How about that? See, I got to stay focused already. He distracted me. I'm Dr. Serelda Herbin. I am one of the master facilitators for the Society for Diversity and the Institute for Diversity Certification. That is how I have come to know Leah and Derwin Smiley and their team, and that it is a phenomenal team, by the way. And so I just want to get the formalities out of the way and say thanks to all of them. The next thing that I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about myself. I am born and raised from Louisiana. The more I talk today, you will probably hear the draw a little bit deeper. That's all right. If you cannot understand what I'm saying, stop me and I'll translate just in case the Southern draw comes out a little strong. Okay. All right. I graduated from Grambling State University, HBCU, in Grambling, Louisiana. I was part of the world-famed Tiger Marching Band at Grambling when I was there. I played saxophone, clarinet, and I was the lead vocalist there. Don't ask me to sing, but then again, I may sing the national anthem before I'm done. So how about that? So I was very, very grateful to get my computer information systems degree from Grambling. I also was commissioned in the United States Army while I was there. And from there, I got my master's degree about 5 years later while I was still active duty in the Army from Webster University in business administration. And then further, I had no intentions of going back to school to get a degree. I simply wanted to get an MBA because that was kind of part of what my skill set was, what my gifts are. I love to see things in order. I like to see strategic planning. I like to see organization. So that was my niche. I was like, I have arrived once I get this MBA. And I am, before I get any further, I am a non-discriminating Christian. Leah actually educated me on that term. And I have my own revelation about that, but I am a non-discriminating Christian, and I prayed about it. God said, you need to go back to school to get a doctorate degree. And I'm like, why? Because I am in the military, not knowing that 3 years later, I would not be promoted to lieutenant colonel, and I had to leave the military involuntarily. So God knew. That is not the purpose of this session. I am an ordained elder, and I will not start preaching on this call because the Society for Diversity did not have me to come on here to do that. So, okay, that's number two. If I start preaching, I need you all to put your hands up so I can remember, wait a minute, that is not what I'm supposed to be doing, okay? All right, so I actually went back and I got my doctorate degree from Regent University, and that degree is in strategic leadership and leadership coaching. From there, in 2016, the same year that I was separated from the Army, I graduated with my doctorate in strategic leadership. And so at that point, one of the things that was a crucible moment for me as a veteran when I was going through the doctorate program, and I've never had issues with learning, I've never had issues with school, so that wasn't it. My department chair noticed that I was a little nervous. And she said, Serelda, what is it? Why are you so nervous about getting this degree or not being able to attain it or feeling that you don't have credibility in it? And I said, well, I've been in the Army, and this is me, the way that I'm saying it to her. She said, well, I was just in the Army. You know, I don't really know anything about the outside world. My whole career was in the military. And she said something to me that was so very profound. This is what she said to me. Serelda, there's a difference between being unqualified and uncomfortable. You're not unqualified, you're uncomfortable. And I was like, wow, that's powerful. That is very powerful. And I've taken that, I've shared that with different people because I sense the same energy and spirit in some people that I come in contact with. We have to understand that there's a difference between being uncomfortable and unqualified. Many of us are walking around on this earth thinking that we are unqualified, but we're not. We are uncomfortable. By the way, many of us spend extra money going back to school to get more education when we really don't need it because we have more than we need and we haven't applied what we have. How about that? So leaving the military, it was an adjustment for me because I had to prove to myself, not to the world, I had to prove to myself that I wasn't just a veteran. I was a qualified professional who happened to be a veteran. I am a female who's a diversity director in the Department of the Navy, and I happen to be Black. And I happen to be a female. See how the descriptors sound different? And many times in society, before we even go out and present ourselves to society, we do it to ourselves. It's like, oh yeah, I'm the first Black female. Now, let's be clear, because we're in open space here. We're all adults. My family is rooting for me. They are happy I'm the first Black female, the first Black director of that particular organization in the Navy. But my descriptor of being a Black female does not qualify me. My expertise qualify me. My experiences qualify me. And many times we self-inflict that doubt. We self-inflict that doubt. When in essence, we really should be just doing it. And another mentor said this to me, do it scared. Sorrel, do you pause and you will talk your way out of what is meant for you? Why? You are overqualified for half the positions that you always take. Now, put a disclaimer out. There are some places that we will go. This is one of my first points that I want you to remember. There are some places that we're going to go in, and in our minds, we're saying we are not qualified to be here. And God is saying, again, I'm a non-discriminating Christian. So you will hear me say God, you may hear me say prayer, you may hear me say meditation throughout this presentation because I show up as who I am, right? And I think sometimes we go into these spaces and we don't understand our purpose. Sometimes we stay longer than we should. Sometimes we move faster than we should. And sometimes we don't move at all. As a veteran in the United States Army, I didn't have a choice to deploy to Iraq in 2010 with an almost 2-year-old at home and an almost 5-year-old at home who, when I got back, my daughter, who was almost 2 years old, did not remember me. My sister is 6 years older than I am. And when I got back from Iraq, let me build another context into that. My husband was there at the same time. So my children were home with their grandparents because their parents were in Iraq. Northern Iraq, Southern Iraq. And at some point in Iraq, my husband said, why don't you want me to come visit? First of all, if you think about an environment, I don't know, in the United States, and I don't know, maybe a criminal infested environment, let's just picture that, right? And you've got to go through there to get to another part of town. That's kind of how Iraq was, where he was and where I was. There was a dangerous highway or a route that he had to take in order to see me. I said, no, I don't want you to come see me. He thought I didn't want to be with him. He thought I had picked up another man or something. I don't know what he thought. But I said, no, we're both in Iraq and our children are home. Any extra movement that we do, we could have children that don't have parents. So let's just be still. And luckily, we were able to actually have him fly over. He didn't have to drive on the road. Why am I saying that? Because being a veteran is stress that you don't see. Many people understand that we are part of a profession of arms. However, psychologically, you don't see a lot of things. And I understand from doing a little research that it's not just veterans in the military. You can have veterans in the police force, veterans in the NERT. Every profession has a pocket of psychological stress. But when you're talking about being in harm's way, going into foreign countries to actually say, I'm going here to protect my country, that's a psychological space that you can't explain away. My husband, who talks about it often, he suffers from PTSD. One of his byproducts is anger. We didn't know. I just knew he was different when he came back. He's deployed to Iraq 3 times. The first time when they first started, there were no tents, there were no buildings. He slept on the ground. He slept on a cot. They had to, and I'm being very explicit so you can understand the dynamics and the nuances. They had to burn their feces. They didn't have any bathrooms. So this was at the beginning of the war, psychologically. That's a space that you cannot say you understand if you've never been there. I went to Iraq in 2010. I said, God, I don't want to see no Iraqis. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to look at them. Just let me go and do what I have to do and come back. What happened to me on day 2 of getting to Iraq? I was voluntold to be one of the volunteers for the Iraqi Ground Forces Boys and Girls Club. God, is this a joke? So now I have to take care of the Iraqi. Now, don't get me wrong. These were allies. These weren't enemies. These were the Iraqis that were allies. But in my mind, coming from America, I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't even want to interact. That totally changed my life. Remember now, there are some places that we sit still, some places where we should move, and some places that we can't control where we're going. I couldn't control that, but God knew. Just like God knew that I wouldn't get promoted and I got out and now I'm doing well, right? So now I'm interacting with 3-year-olds. Imagine a 3-year-old walking on an interstate with a 1-year-old, taking them to get something to eat. I said a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I didn't say a 12-year-old and a 2-year-old. I said a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. No shoes, dusty. They see the American truck with the flag and they start running to the tent. It blew my mind. Here's another experience. I had the opportunity to participate in one of the birthday parties for one of the Iraqis that I was working with for the Boys and Girls Club. He had a set of twins, 16-year-old girls. Went to his home, me forgetting we're in an Easternized country. I decided that I was going to be safe by drinking a lot of water, because if they offered me something to eat, culturally, you can't say no. You have to accept it. But if you're not hungry, you can say, oh, and you don't have to eat as much. Okay, so I showed up. I've got to use the bathroom, folks. I couldn't hold it. Where's your restroom? They take me to a corner in the back of the house with a mud hole in the floor. And I'm looking like, huh, what? That's the rest. How do I flush? How do I flush? It was like, no, this is it. Just pull the curtain, and when you're done, it's like, oh, okay. That was my first experience. The second experience was, we're westernized. We go to someone's house. And oh, by the way, you all can certainly use the chat, because I definitely want to interact with you all if you have any thoughts around anything that I'm sharing, or you can wait until the end. This experience changed my life as well. Excuse me. One of the things that I asked the interpreter to ask the husband is, can I speak with the wife? And he said, yes. And I said, well, I don't see her. And I noticed there were only men in the front of the house. And he said, well, we don't allow our daughters and my wife to come out because there are men here, even though you're allies. The men that are here, I don't know them. So I'm not going to expose the women in my family to these men. And they said, so they're in the back of the house. I said, well, I don't mind going in the back of the house. I want to thank her for cooking all of this food, because the food is up here. She's back there. It made me feel weird. Like, I can't not say thank you to her. And so I went in the back. They were in one bedroom. It was 8 people in that room. 8 women. And the interpreter, we were going through the formalities. Thank you, this, that, and the other. And here I am again with my westernized mind. Well, what kind of gift would you like? I'd like to bring you something back. I'm thinking candles and, decorations. And this next comment blew my mind. The interpreter said, they want sanitary napkins. So in my mind, I'm still not connecting. I'm like, oh, shoot, I can go back to my tent. I got boxes of those that I deployed with. No, I mean, like, what else? What else do you want? And they came back and they said, sanitary napkins. And tears just rolled down my face, because it clicked for me. They are allies in Iraq that are supporting Americans who are on high value target lists. So if anyone sees them and their children, they will be shot at gunpoint. They can't even go to the store to get the necessities. I'm still talking about being a veteran. I'm still talking about the psychological effects of understanding we live in a country with freedoms that we don't even understand. When they asked me for sanitary napkins because they couldn't go right up the street to a store on the other side of the fence, it broke my heart. It broke my heart because then I started thinking about all of the stuff that I waste. And I'm being honest, I bet everybody on this call probably wastes something. And these people are fighting for their lives, fighting for their freedoms. And I asked another guy, I said, I understand that we're here, but how do you feel about Americans being here? And he said, my friend, it's like a cousin came to live with us for the summer and they never left. We love our cousin, but we want our space back. That's how they describe the Americans coming to help. And that was another eye-opening experience. When we talk about veterans, when we talk about diversity, when we talk about inclusion from a psychological standpoint, we don't have to look far. This is not a research-based, I've got to go and get a lot of statistics type situation. This is human decency. Being a veteran places us in situations that we are not able to decide if we're going to go or not. But how you navigate those spaces once you get those experiences really does matter. So as we go through this society with diversity, when we go through the society of inclusion, belonging, exclusion, culture, accepting other people that may not have lived like us, LGBTQ plus A community, veterans, people in organizations will sometimes not hire veterans. And I've heard this comment, we don't want veterans, they got PTSD, just like that. Well, I don't have it. Well, what do you mean? All veterans don't have PTSD. It's a stereotype. We can go down every ethnic group from white, Black, Asian, Hispanic, it doesn't matter the group. Everybody has stereotypes that have been formed for them. I didn't form a stereotype on myself as a veteran that I have PTSD. Why would I? I don't have it. So if you think about that simple statement, how often do we do that in other groups? How often? Here's another story as a veteran. Fort Bliss, Texas, right on the tip of the country of Mexico, the far left side of the map of Texas. My first duty assignment, showed up, my commander, I'll call him Captain Green. He said, give me a little bit about yourself. I told him, he said, I told him I was from Grambling, everything I told you all earlier. He said, okay, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am from North Carolina. My dad's a racist. My mom is a reformed racist. I'm working on it. I've never worked with a Black female, and I've never worked with a Black female that was educated and that was an officer. What are your questions? So I took my book, I closed it. I said, sir, I guess I don't have any questions. That was my initial entry into the Army. Now, when I facilitate today in my organizations and they ask me to talk about unconscious bias, we need unconscious bias training. That's what we need in order to fix this. No, we don't. We need connection. We need more communication. We don't have any, no, we don't need communication. We have email, we have text, we have Teams, we have Zoom, we have webinars, we have newspapers, we have TV, we have radio, we have Facebook, we have social media. Those are communication resources. They're not connection resources. We can go to any of those venues that I just talked about. Those are forms of communication. They're not forms of connection. How does this relate to unconscious bias? Because I had to connect to the fact that I now have a bias that I didn't ask for. Before that incident, I did not have a bias against white men who were supervisors. Every time I saw a white male that was a supervisor beyond that point, I was traumatized. My hands started to sweat. My heart started beating really fast. And I'm saying, what is wrong with me? Part of my family is white back in Louisiana. Now, I probably never met them. Well, I probably did and didn't know that I did. That's a whole nother story. We'll talk about that if you all want me to bring it up. But I didn't have a problem interacting with white men until that guy did that to me. Oh, by the way, it wasn't just that incident. We deployed to Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. He had me fixing coffee and making breakfast for people that were lower ranking than me. My husband at the time was a general's aide back in New Mexico. He called this general. The general came down the next day, pulled me out of there. Needless to say, that guy did not last long in the military. He started doing it to other people and they put him out. Thank God. That's one, though. That's one. Why am I sharing this story? We have a responsibility as well, how to show up. I'm still talking about being a veteran. I'm still talking about diversity. I'm still talking about inclusion. But we have to understand how we show up as well. What do you think my career would look like if I would have carried that bias around all the way up to this point? For those of you who know a little bit about the government, I'm a GS-15, which is the level right below senior executive. I got out of the military at the 04 level. So I far surpassed what I was in the military on the civilian government side. In other words, I've made up for what I was not able to attain in uniform, but I'm still serving. We have to understand that serving does not necessarily always mean in uniform. But we can serve those that have served in uniform. We can serve those that are still serving in uniform by showing up as our authentic selves, number one, understanding what that looks like. I have to remind people in my job today, I am not a Black diversity director. I'm a diversity director who was qualified for the job, and I happen to be Black and I happen to be female. There's a huge difference in the narrative. Now, if you want to tell me that I'm a Black female, whatever your narrative is and how you see me, people will ask me that all the time. How do you want us to regard you, however you see me? Well, you're not going to get mad if we don't call you doctor? No, because you don't see me that way. The more authentic you show up, the better I can do my job. I'm not going to get wrapped around the axle and demand that you call me a doctor. I wasn't born a doctor. I was born Serelda. And you could call me whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Like I told my son, he's a sophomore at LSU. I said, dude, I told him just like this. Dude, nobody's going to mess up that paycheck that hits my bank account every other Thursday. Words? Are you serious? I have a goal. My goal is not to work long-term for the Department of the Navy, the Department of Defense, or to have been in the military. What happens beyond the uniform? As a veteran, I'm still showing up. I'm still telling my story. I'm still making people understand that the vehicle. That was a vehicle. Well, it looks like something happened. Hold on a second. Can you all see me? Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. That was a vehicle. Think about a vehicle. And I can't see you all, and we can talk about this. You all can write this down when I pause for questions. When you buy a vehicle that's brand new, do you wonder or worry? And I got some faces on the screens. I can maybe see your body language. Do you worry about if that vehicle is going to break down if it's brand new? Okay. All right. So if you think about a vehicle that you buy that's used and they say you got this much lifespan on it, your mindset is different, isn't it? Because you already know you probably don't have a warranty because it's not new. It's the same situation with your jobs, with your professions, where you work. Depending on if you haven't already nestled into your sweet spot. I have not nestled into my sweet spot in the military or in the government or in life. In my profession, I like to write books. I like to empower. I like to speak. I like to do these things. But I still have a job. I teach this to my children. You're in a vehicle. College is a vehicle. It's part of how you navigate from one place to the next. When I left the military, that was the revelation I got. Serelda, that was a vehicle. That was one stop along your journey. It's time to change vehicles. As a veteran, sometimes it's not as easy to change vehicles because we already have the seat contour to how we like it. We already have our boots kind of shaped into how we want them. We kind of have our uniform, but now it's time to change uniforms. How often do we sit in life in the wrong uniform? What do I look like going into a library with a swimsuit on? That is crazy. The visual of that doesn't even make sense to me. Why would I go to Alaska with a swimsuit on? Why would I show up outside in the snow with beach slippers on to scrape the snow off of the driveway? It makes no sense. We have to understand, not only as veterans, and as a veteran for me, I knew when it was time to shift. But sometimes we don't know. Psychologically, veterans have flashbacks. Human beings have flashbacks. But we also have to understand that as a veteran, leaving our families, having to plug and play into different spaces when we move. I've moved across the world. I stayed in Germany, South Carolina, Texas. I've been in Virginia for about 12 years now. My last job, I didn't tell you all that, was at the Pentagon. I worked for the Secretary of the Army for Diversity and Leadership. And then I retired and came out of that job and became a government civilian. So I've worked at the highest levels of government. I've sang the national anthem for Michelle Obama. My husband worked for Barack Obama. He's also military. We've had to manage our careers and decide, well, if we start to compete, who's going to taper off? I was like, me? When I actually started my career in the military, I was still doing pageants in the Miss America system. When I went to El Paso, I was Miss Black El Paso 2000. When I deployed, they were following news stories with me in the military downrange. And I felt ashamed because there was a culture that said, you are supposed, watch this. When I came in the military, I was trying my best to make sure that I fit in. I did not want to stand out. Hadn't the tables turned? Now everybody wants to stand out. It's not wrong, because I'm being recorded, so I don't want to get fired. There is a balance to standing out. There's a way to stand out. I teach my kids this. I teach people this in facilitation. Stand out by producing. Stand out by performing. Stand out by showing up and treating people with dignity and respect. Veterans, most of the time, they just want to serve. Most of them, it's one way or the other. If you encounter a veteran, they're going to either want to talk about it or they're not going to want to talk about it. And that's what we have to realize. Now, I'm going to pause to see if anyone has any questions, any insights as we continue to move through this conversation. Is there anything in the chat?
Well, Dr. Serrelda, I just want to first of all salute you for your service and definitely for your transparency and your testimony. It's empowering, number one, encouraging, number two, and very enlightening. I am a quasi-veteran myself, and I came through El Paso, Fort Bliss.
Wow.
Along that track as well, was stationed in Germany. But I came in a very interesting time because when I was in high school, they had the simultaneous membership program where you can go through your basic training in between your junior and senior year summers. So you do your basic training after your junior year of high school. And when you graduate high school, you can go through and finish your AIT. And so I started on that track. But when I got to Fort Jackson, the drill sergeant, after 2 weeks, kicked me out.
Wow.
And told me that I was not enlisted material. I was officer material, and sent me back to Mississippi to Tougaloo College, where I got into ROTC. Yeah. And all my life, I wanted to be a soldier. All of my life. Brother was coming back from Vietnam. I went into basic training 4 years after the Vietnam conflict had ended. So it was just in my DNA to be a soldier. So your colleague of the cloth there in Virginia, the Johnson, Beverly Johnson, Minister Beverly Johnson, her husband, I was in OBC together at El Paso. So we went to Germany together as well. But what interesting happened when I got to Germany, a lot of African Americans weren't being promoted. And a lot of African Americans, if you were ADA, you had to do aircraft recognition. So you had to learn that And so I was noticing, one, enlisted persons wasn't being promoted because they couldn't pass the aircraft recognition, and two, officers weren't getting those executive officer positions, those motor pool positions, and they were really kind of being chapter out low key wise. So I started a program. It was, it found me. I didn't find it. I just started working with them. So the Army and I clashed, to say the least. But I began to raise awareness of the injustices that was going on in the early '80s when we were in Germany. My youngest brother, joined the Marines, so he just retired about 6 years ago. But he has PTSD now. As a matter of fact, he's in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And when you watch, I'm trying to make a connection. Since you used that term, Doc, I'm trying to make the connection. My nephew is the band director for LSU.
Are you serious? Oh.
Dr. Kelvin Jones, that's my nephew at LSU. So all of these connections are true. And one of the things, especially in the church as a retired clergy, and I'm serving now in an organization that is a Christian organization. And one of the things that we keep missing the mark on is veterans, and how we minister to veterans, and how we not only appreciate them, but have a context for veterans to, number one, feel validated and appreciated. So the line of work that God has called us to now puts us in a position to put ourselves in the way to advocate for this market of people, because they're feeling, one, let me back up a minute. Now PTSD is the disqualifier. Before 9/11, it was those brothers and sisters who had served in the Vietnam conflict that were identified as baby killers. Yeah. People didn't want to appreciate the war, the Vietnam War, and so they were excluded. And when they came back home, those persons couldn't find where they fit in at. Now we have a different category that persons that are veterans are being labeled as, and PTSD is one of them, not to mention those that have been wounded or those that have suffered mental health in other ways from serving in the military. So we continue to have to raise not only the awareness, but raise the bar of appreciation and validation. So I just want to thank you for being able and courageous enough to come on and share your story and your experiences in the military with us today.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that. Like I said, we definitely have to connect after this, and my son, as a sophomore down there, I want him to make the right connections as well, because as Black males, if we get connected, that's a whole nother conversation. As a Black male, if you're connected in the wrong group, that's it.
That's correct.
And I told him the other day, you've got to stay on the right side of the system. That is not what I come on here to talk about, but like I said, that's another conversation, Martin, we may be able to discuss. We've got to stay on the right side of the system. And if we don't know the rules, we can walk into quicksand and not be able to get out. And so I think it's the same thing with some veterans. As a woman, as a Black female who happened to have been an officer in the Army and combat arms. Initially, I was Air Defense Artillery as well. My intent was not to be Air Defense Artillery. They assessed me improperly. I say it was God, but I asked for AG and someone typed a D instead of a G. So I got general. And eventually I transferred over to AG, and then kind of parlayed into equal opportunity and diversity and fair treatment. My first assignment shaped what I wanted to do in the military. I could not figure out how to have a perfect sweet spot in that space, but I understand now that every part of that journey was divine. My pastor a couple of weeks ago preached a message on divine detours. And oftentimes we don't realize some of the detours that we have to embrace the journey. Instead of fighting, I'm not supposed to be going this way, you probably should be going that way, but it wasn't something you decided. Oftentimes in life, we don't get to choose where we land. We don't get to choose where we land, but we do have an obligation of how we respond to that and navigate. I have a cousin who was in and out of jail, and he was, 30 something years old at the time. And he kept saying, well, you all didn't do this for me. And if you would have done this, I said, after 18, you know what happens, right? And he just, he said, what are you talking about? I said, you are an adult after 18. Every decision that you make after that, even if it's going to counseling or to come talk to family to sort out whatever you think we owed you, that's your responsibility at that point. Nobody is blaming you for having a life when your mom passed, before you graduated high school and all that type of stuff. But you do have an obligation as an adult to self-regulate. Now, my upbringing, which I didn't bring up initially, I was raised by my grandmother. My mom was a crack addict. My dad introduced her. And so I was raised by my grandmother from the age of 3. So drugs, alcohol, all of that stuff, you will never see me ingest. You know, although I have a son in college who thinks that it's the cool thing to do sometimes because that's just the cool thing to do. I'm like, dude, stay away from it. Anything that alters your mind, you probably should stay away from it. I have an issue with even taking medicine sometimes because it alters my state of mind. That's a whole nother conversation. But I was raised by my grandmother. My grandmother died when I was 16 years old. I stayed with 7 different families between 11th and 12th grade. When my grandmother died, my mom would walk up the street in my neighborhood and in my small town and would ask me for money for drugs because she couldn't recognize who I was. Or another explicit statement, I had classmates who sold drugs and would tell me that my mom had given them blow jobs to get a piece of crack.
Jesus.
So psychologically, if we want to parlay that into me being a veteran, oh man, this was apple pie for me. Somebody looking at me and telling me what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do, I had already been self-regulated. I want to erase where we came from and not parlay that into where we're going. There are so many people in this earth right now that are trying to erase a piece of how they grew up because it doesn't fit. We want to decide, I'm not going to talk about that, but I'm going to talk about this. I'll give you another plug. I wrote a book from at risk to at the top. It's on Amazon. It was actually it was a bestseller within 24 hours when I first wrote it back in 18 or 19. And in that book, I talked about it. I talked about my life story. I talked about how easily it is for me to connect with people because a whole community raised me. So when I see color, I'm not afraid. Now, biases, like I told you all, that is a thing. It was a thing, but I had to self-regulate and say, I will not blame every white male who happens to be a supervisor based off of what this guy did to me. Because if I do that, guess what? Let me pull some statistics in. The majority of the people who run the world are middle-aged white men. That's not a statistic that I made up. Go Google it, you will find it. It's a true statement. The majority of the people that run the world are middle-aged white men. Corporate America, nonprofits, churches, wherever, you name it. You talk about the foundation of wealth, it's not minorities. It's middle-aged white men. So how are we going to operate in the earth where the majority of the people who are influencers and decision makers are middle-aged white men and we don't include them? I'm not trying to give a diversity class, IDC, which I do teach for them, but that is a plug. And I talk about that when I do teach the up-and-coming diversity professionals. We cannot exclude anybody because now we're doing the very thing that we are asking people not to do to us as minorities. So we have to be very careful and make sure that we're not walking a line based off of social justice or moral imperatives only. Yes, I'm a Black female. Yes, I want to be at the top of the food chain and go up as high as I can, as fast as I can, so that people that look like me can understand, oh, so people like me can actually get that far up? Okay, well, my mindset is going to change. I'm going to try. Right now, people aren't even trying because they don't feel they can attain it. Now, here's another plug. As a veteran, most of my supervisors did not look like me. Here's another plug. Most of the supervisors that I had that did look like me were the worst ones that I had. And I'm not saying most means there are some that were okay, but there are more of them that were not.
Yes.
Why am I
come off mute for that one?
Oh,
yeah.
Talking about this with our diversity? Why am I talking about this with Veterans Day? Because no matter the profession that you are in, you have to understand psychologically how you show up and what you accept is going to determine where you go. I know right off if I'm going to have a hard time in the job. I'm not in the military anymore. So guess what? I don't have to stay. I'm at a place now where I have told my supervisors, look, I'm already retired and I can go home and watch Dr. Phil. And I will, if this gets too crazy. And they laugh. I said, but I'm serious because I'm in a place of peace at this point. I'm 46 years old. My goal was to retire at 55 or something like that. My first retirement was at 40 years old, 6 years ago. I was like, it's not time for me to retire. I still got energy and zeal. I want to do more. So here I am. From 2016 to 2022, I went from a GS 13 to a GS 15. There are no other GS levels. The next level is senior executive, which is equivalent to a general officer in uniform as a civilian. Will I ever attain that? I don't know. If that's what God wants, I will. If it's not, I will continue to serve where I am. So I'm saying all of that to say today, I look forward to hearing from you all if you have any comments. It has been an absolute pleasure sharing my experiences with you all. For the Society of Diversity, again, thank you all so much for the opportunity today. I am looking forward to more of these narratives and discourses as we continue to build. We have veterans in the Society for Diversity. Society for Diversity is also working with the federal government right now to make more partnerships to sustain and make sure we're spreading this certification around. And I'm happy that I am a veteran during this time and connected with the Society for Diversity. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see if there are any questions, if there are any comments as we continue to round out the conversation today. And I'll pause here for any insights and comments.
Yeah, I just want to raise a question. I guess it was a question and an observation because I talk to a lot of young people, especially young people of color, who do not find the military as an option. They have bought into a narrative that's the white man's army. They're bought into a narrative that's not an option for me. And I know it's not for everybody, but at the same time, I think they give the military across the board a bad name. So what would be some of your one, suggestions, or two, encounters in that context where you have heard young people say that?
I agree with your statement. There is a narrative out there that the military is not an option. This thing about patriotism, it looks different today. Number one. Number two, when I was coming up, I didn't have money to go through school. So I had a full ROTC scholarship. I didn't necessarily want to go in the military. Like, again, think about a person that was doing pageants. I was doing pageants. I was not thinking about putting no boots on. I wanted to get my nails done, my toes done, wear my makeup. I wasn't thinking about that. I'm like, oh, I got to not be able to do all of this. No, I don't want to do that. Patriotism looks different. I think the other part of it is, Harold, is access. When I was in the military and access to what kids have now, they have this microwave access to everything. They get answers to things that may not be accurate, and then it's locked in. And it's very difficult for them to come out of it. They live in a very virtual world. Everything is shorthand. Everything is quick. I can get it right now. And I believe that narrative is causing some of that. What I normally tell people, my son and my daughter is like, I am not going in the military at all. My son just dyed his hair all black. He had dreads, and the front half of his head had dreads green over here, blue, black, purple, yellow. He paints his fingernails, and he's not part of the LGBTQ community. He just likes to paint his nails different color. I'm like, what is going on? Hey, and he has a cat named Drill. That's a boy cat. Just they are very unidimensional when it comes to some of the stuff that we were brought up with to say, this is important and this better not ever be important to you. There are no lines anymore. Now, I will say, Harold, in terms of historical legacy and families that are embedded in that legacy for military. I think that thread of it is still happening. I do think that we still have to push the narrative that if we want to make change and influence change, we've got to be on the right side of the system. And sometimes we walk on the wrong side of the system and we're in the middle of a landmine and don't even know it. Their way of detecting trouble is very, very mild, if that makes sense. Their way of detecting what a career is rappers, songwriters, models. And I'm not saying anything's wrong with any of this because I am a vocalist. I mean, I've sang on national television before. I was on Sunday Best. So I am a performing artist by trade, by my natural abilities. But I also knew that if I lost my voice, that's my career. Unless I got a degree in business or I know how to write songs. I'm a songwriter, I'm a producer. That's what I tell my son. He's also musically inclined. My daughter is as well, but they have other gifts. And so I think we have to make sure we share, because here's another dynamic that you didn't mention that I'm going to throw in here before we end. Suicide is a very easy outlet for most of these kids that should not be, because they think, if I don't do this, then the whole world is over and there is no other alternative. I think we have to start teaching alternatives and critical thinking earlier, because the military may, in fact, for my son and my daughter in the future, become an option. My husband was in the military. I was in the military. We both retired from the military. And I tell them, you wouldn't be staying where you're staying, driving and what you're driving in, going on trips. There are some kids who've never gone on family trips. There's some kids who have never left the country. There's some kids who don't have passports. There's some kids who have never been on a plane. And we're over here arguing about, well, why did you give Victor commission more than mine? Because he's 19 and you're 14. Why are we having this conversation? I didn't even get commission, let alone allowance. I got, go clean that bathroom up. I got, you ain't going nowhere, so go sit down. It's Friday and it's dangerous out there. Mama, it's 2 red lights in this town. Everybody know each other. Ain't nobody gonna hurt me. Nope, you ain't going. Go sit down. I went to church, Bible study, choir rehearsal, Sunday school, BTU, church service like 1,200 times a day. And then I went back home and I'm too tired to even ask her to go anywhere because she done wore me out. Or I'm going over to Miss Mariah's house, who makes the funeral flowers that traumatized me because I had to sleep in that room. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm having flashbacks. But we have to make sure that we are teaching problem-solving skills, we are teaching critical thinking skills, and we are teaching alternatives. I don't think we realize how much they don't understand those things. I think we assume because they can pick up things so fast that it's there. It's not there. The other thing that I'll say, and I'll end here for you all to share anything else. I talk to, in my facilitations, I talk about my daughter and I talk about my son a lot. I don't care if somebody has parents with 2 moms, 2 dads. I don't care. I'm a non-discriminating Christian. And I said this and people were in an uproar. Nobody has ever asked me as a heterosexual who I slept with when I was at work. Nobody ever challenged me. Nobody ever attacked me. So why are we doing this with people in the LGBTQ community? I am not the jury and the judge. Yes, I am an ordained elder. I go to church. I read my Bible. I have revelation from God. I have a prophetic gift. I am discerning. Guess what? He didn't tell me nothing about judging somebody or shunning people because they're different from me. I understand the part in the Bible and the scripture, and this is not a Bible study about judging. I get it all. I understand it. I have a very deep knowledge of it. But you are not one, I don't care if it's the Pope. Now, this is on record. You are not going to convince me to shun, exclude, or hate any person. Any person. And if you are, then I'm in the wrong place. That's my story. I think this society and this generation of children coming up behind us, like my daughter who's 14 and my son who's 19, they don't care about that stuff. They don't. When we have sleepovers, I got white, black, Hispanic, lesbian, gay coming to parties. I don't care. As long as you ain't doing something to hurt my child, hurt me, as anybody else that's heterosexual, you all right with me. You know why? Because they have souls, they have spirits, and they're human beings first. I'm a human being first. And the way that I've treated you all on this call today will determine how you see me when you hang up. I could have come on here judging. I could have come on here saying, this is what we're not going to do. I could have come on here saying, as a veteran, you all don't treat us right. I could have said all types of things. But I showed up as a human first. When we talk about diversity, inclusion, equity, accessibility, belonging, culture, whatever words you want to add, because we get a new word every week almost, it seems like. Whatever words you want to add, we're human beings first. Without my title of elder, without my title of major, without my title of doctor, without my title of leadership coach, I'm Sorrelda first. I'm a human first. And I think if we start and get back to the spirit of humanity first, and I'm not talking about this whitewashed, everybody matters. I'm not talking about that. Everybody does matter. But I'm talking about treating everybody with a level of respect and not picking who you're going to respect. So as we close out today, I want to remind you all that we're humans first. I happen to be a human that is a veteran and a whole lot of other things, but we're human beings first. And once we start talking to the human being, we'll realize that we're more connected than we really think. Society for Diversity, thank you all so much for the opportunity today to speak, share, and allow conversation today. Thank you all, and I will pause for any closing comments or insights. Thank you all so much.